On the day Adrian Holt's will was to be read, his son, Taryn, sat in the quiet study, his heart pounding. Adrian Holt, Taryn's father, had amassed an impressive fortune estimated at $36 million. Following his passing, Taryn held out hope that he would receive at least a portion of this inheritance. However, before the lawyer could even open the folder of documents, Selena, Taryn's stepmother, whispered with a sly smile, sharp as a knife's edge, "Don't expect a single cent, Taryn. Your father and I discussed everything. It all belongs to me now." Her words struck Taryn like a hammer blow. For years, Selena had treated him like an outsider, as if he were an unwelcome guest in his own father's home. Now, sitting next to Uncle Vernon, she appeared completely at ease, as if victory was already hers. She casually crossed her legs, leaned back in her chair, and waited with undisguised pleasure for Taryn to break. Taryn, in turn, clenched his fists under the table, trying to maintain a semblance of calm. He noticed his mother, Janelle, sitting a few chairs away, her jaw clenched with anger. Janelle had always protected him from Selena's cruelty, but in this situation, she was powerless. The moment of truth had arrived, poised to decide everything. The lawyer, adjusting his glasses, began to read the will in a calm, dispassionate voice. With each sentence spoken, Selena's smile grew wider and more self-satisfied. She was certain of her victory. But suddenly, the lawyer turned a page, cleared his throat, and uttered a phrase that instantly wiped the smile from Selena's face and allowed Taryn to finally breathe a sigh of relief. Taryn could never have imagined being in a situation where his father's life's work would be divided like items at an auction. That morning, donning a black suit that felt too heavy for his shoulders, he still keenly felt the bitter sting of loss. Adrian Holt was gone. Adrian had been everything to Taryn, a man who built his empire from scratch and never missed an opportunity to remind his son of the value of hard work. He didn't spoil Taryn, but always made sure his son knew he mattered. Yet, sitting in the quiet lawyer's office, where his will was to be read, Taryn felt as though he was about to be annihilated. The office was furnished in an old-fashioned style, with polished wooden walls and bookshelves lined with legal literature that exuded a faint scent of dust. Heavy curtains let in little light, plunging the room into a dim twilight. Beside Taryn sat Uncle Vernon, Adrian's younger brother. Vernon had always possessed a quiet strength of character. He wasn't as wealthy as Adrian, but he knew how to instill confidence in Taryn. As a child, he would tell Taryn stories of how Adrian secured his first real estate deal through sheer persistence, knocking on every door until someone gave him a chance. Uncle Vernon had always been proud of Adrian and often reminded Taryn that he had inherited those same qualities. Across from them sat Selena, Taryn's stepmother. She was clad in a black silk dress, her hair perfectly coiffed, not a single strand out of place. Yet, her face expressed anything but grief. While Taryn sat hunched in his chair, fists clenched, Selena seemed perfectly comfortable, slightly turned towards the lawyer, as if awaiting confirmation of what she already believed. A faint smile played on her lips, completely at odds with the solemn atmosphere in the room. Taryn had observed that expression for years, a look that declared she was in control, and he was merely an obstacle. Selena entered Taryn's father's life when he was 15. His parents had divorced 2 years prior, and his mother, Janelle, did her best to keep their family together. She wasn't wealthy or powerful like Adrian, but she loved Taryn boundlessly. When Adrian introduced Selena, Taryn tried to be polite. She was younger than Adrian, sharp-tongued and beautiful, drawing attention to herself. Initially, Taryn hoped they could get along, but he soon realized Selena saw him as a rival, a reminder of the life his father lived before her. She demeaned Taryn with casual cruelty. If he visited his father on weekends, she would mock the clothes his mother bought him. "Your father works hard on his reputation, Taryn," she would say. "Try not to look like you're out of place here." If Taryn tried to speak at dinner, she would roll her eyes and remind him he was just a child, and when his father wasn't around, she would sometimes lean in and whisper words he would never forget. "One day, all of this will be mine. You'll see." At first, Taryn dismissed it as jealousy or insecurity, but over the years, her words accumulated like stones on his chest. He learned to be silent in her presence. His visits to his father's house grew shorter and their conversations more strained. Taryn loved his father, but hated the world Selena had created around him. Nevertheless, there were moments that reminded him his father did care. Adrian would pull Taryn aside, away from Selena's sharp tongue, and ask about school. He pushed him for good grades, to think about business, and to never let anyone tell him he wasn't good enough. "My blood runs in you, son," he once told Taryn. "That's worth more than any insult." These words stayed with Taryn, even as Selena tried to drown them out. Now, sitting in this lawyer's office, Taryn didn't know which side of his father he would face. Was he the man who once said he was strong and capable? Or was he the husband who allowed his second wife to control the situation and disregard him? Taryn's fear wasn't just about the money. He feared his father didn't believe in him, that he wasn't important enough to receive a part of the inheritance. Taryn's mother sat 2 chairs away, her face taut with tension. She wasn't there for the money either. She had no claim to Adrian's estate and knew it. She came because she couldn't let her son sit there alone. She had endured years of watching Selena demean Taryn, and now she watched Selena with a gaze as sharp as glass, ready to defend him if the insults began again. A tense silence filled the room. Lawyer Harris, a tall, distinguished man, cleared his throat and spread a stack of documents before him. His voice was steady, professional, and impassive as he announced that the will had been meticulously drafted and updated shortly before Adrian's passing. The words hung in the air like weights, echoing off the wooden wall panels. Selena, comfortably settled in her chair, made no secret of her elation. Her smile broadened, revealing her anticipation of an imminent victory. She cast a glance at Taryn, waiting for disappointment to register on his face, for despair to overwhelm him. She wanted to see him broken, erased from his father's history forever. Uncle Vernon quietly leaned over and whispered, "Patience, nephew. Your father was a man of principle. Remember that." His words became an anchor of salvation for Taryn in a turbulent sea of emotions. Taryn straightened up and looked at the lawyer, ready for anything. He couldn't influence the words about to be spoken, couldn't change his father's will. All he could do was listen, hope, and maintain his dignity in the presence of the triumphant Selena. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just the reading of a will, but a test of everything his father had taught him: resilience, pride, and patience. It wasn't just about $36 million. It was about the significance of his name, his worth, and whether Selena had managed to poison his father's love for him. As the lawyer began to read the will, the room seemed to shrink around Taryn. His voice was calm and measured, but each word resonated like a hammer blow in his chest. He started with small charitable donations and minor gifts to distant relatives. Taryn's mind was elsewhere, while before his eyes stood Selena's smug smirk, her victorious pose, enthroned in the empire his father had built. When Harris read the clause granting Selena control over certain accounts and personal property, she exhaled contentedly and lifted her chin. Her triumph was evident. She cast a glance at Taryn, and the corners of her lips curved into a slight smirk as if saying, "See, it's all mine, just as I promised." Taryn felt a rush of heat up his neck, but forced himself not to react. His mother clutched her purse tighter. She didn't utter a word, but her eyes shot so much fire at Selena they could burn through the table. Uncle Vernon, as always, remained unruffled, sitting upright and listening intently, as if expecting something Selena did not. The lawyer continued to list properties, accounts, and assets that seemed to be passing into Selena's ownership. Each item was like a stab in the back. The Florida vacation home, gone. The vineyard his father bought 10 years ago, gone. Even his cherished art collection was now in her name. With each line of the will, Selena's confidence pressed down on Taryn more heavily. She leaned forward and whispered loud enough for him to hear, "You should have been prepared. You were never meant to be a part of this. He wanted it all to go to me." Her words stirred up memories of the past, the mockery at the dinner table, the feeling of being an outsider in his own home, the constant humiliations. Sitting there, listening to her whisper, Taryn almost believed her. What if his father had let her win? What if he had forgotten his own son? He clenched his teeth, fighting the pain in his chest. He promised himself he wouldn't let her see his weakness. His father had told him, "Strength isn't about shouting the loudest, but about standing tall when others expect you to fall." These words echoed in his head, but they were drowned out by Selina's triumph. The lawyer paused to turn the pages. The rustle of paper filled the silence. Taryn caught Selina's reflection in the polished surface of the table. Her smile shone, her confidence radiated heat. She was certain the game was over. But then the lawyer cleared his throat. A palpable tension filled the solemn atmosphere of the legal office. Before we continue, let me remind you that this will was meticulously revised just 3 months before Mr. Holt's passing. Every clause recorded here possesses undeniable legal force and reflects his final, unshakable wishes, Selina declared, her voice a serpentine whisper. Her smile remained unwavering, unlike Taryn's, which faltered. The recent changes made by his father remained a mystery to him. Could he really have rewritten everything to her? Was this his way of severing ties with Taryn, with his mother, with the family he had once left behind? Doubt gripped his chest like a heavy chain. Taryn stole a glance at his mother, reading unspoken support in her eyes. Whatever happens, you are not alone. This encouragement momentarily eased the oppressive feeling, but Selina gave him no respite. Leaning closer, she hissed like a snake preparing to strike. Now, do you understand? He chose me. He trusted me, not you. You were just his practice family, and now it's my turn to continue his legacy. Her words pierced him like sharp daggers, inflicting pain beyond anything she had ever said. Under the table, his fists involuntarily clenched. He wanted to unleash his anger on her, to wipe that smug smile off her face, but Uncle Vernon's warm and steady hand rested on his, like an anchor holding him back from a storm. "Hold on, Taryn," he whispered. "Your father wasn't blind." There was a peculiar certainty in those words. His father, indeed, had a unique ability to see through people. He often said that wealth was like a litmus test, revealing a person's true character. When money was at stake, masks fell, and you saw people for who they truly were. Was he preparing Taryn for this moment? Minutes stretched into an eternity. Harris's voice, like a monotonous funeral dirge, continued to announce the distribution of stock portfolios, investment accounts, and corporate assets. Selina seemed to revel in this symphony of numbers, her breathing growing lighter and more even. Taryn's chest, in contrast, felt heavy with lead. He felt buried alive under the weight of his father's empire, where each new asset was like a shovel of dirt thrown into a grave. Finally, leaning back in her chair, Selina declared with undisguised triumph in her voice, "I told you, Taryn, your father entrusted everything to me. You should accept it. He knew you weren't ready." His mother's face contorted with anger, and for a moment, Taryn thought she was about to confront the brazen woman, but she held back. Uncle Vernon continued to hold his hand firmly, as if understanding that Taryn needed support now to keep from breaking. In that moment, Taryn understood the true reason for his presence here. He knew Selina would not miss a single opportunity to twist the knife deeper, and he foresaw that Taryn would need all his strength not to succumb to despair. This conflict was not just about the inheritance, but about his father's final judgment of him. Did he believe in the son he raised, or the woman he married? In this room, under Selina's smug smirk and the lawyer's impassive voice, Taryn felt himself balancing on the edge of a precipice of despair. The lawyer, as if waking from a trance, shifted in his chair and scanned the last page of the document. Looking up, he maintained an inscrutable expression. For the first time since the reading began, Selina's smile faltered. It was barely perceptible, but Taryn noticed that fleeting shadow of doubt crossing her face. Straightening in his chair, he felt his heart pound wildly, and the tension in the room reached its peak. Something was about to happen. For the first time all this time, Taryn allowed himself to hope. The air in the room grew thick and heavy with silence, broken only by the lawyer's words. Each sentence already spoken clung to Taryn like chains, plunging him deeper into the fear that his father had indeed left him nothing. Selina's self-assurance, like a heavy perfume, emanated from her across the table, overwhelming and suffocating. She sat with her legs crossed, her hand elegantly resting on the armrest, her smile seemingly unbreakable. She believed the game was won, but then the lawyer pulled a new sheet from the folder. His expression changed, but only subtly. A tension around his mouth, a slight shift of his eyes toward Taryn before returning to the text. It was just a small crack in his monotony, but it was enough to make Taryn straighten up. Selina noticed it too, and for the first time all morning, her smile faltered. Taryn's chest tightened with a strange mix of dread and hope. He wanted to believe his father hadn't abandoned him, but Selina's words, repeated for years, echoed in his mind. She had so often said his father trusted her, that he was forgotten, insignificant. Her voice was in his head now, whispering that he didn't matter. And yet, in that moment, he made a decision. He would not break under her gaze, no matter what awaited him. He would not give her the satisfaction of seeing him crumble. Resilience. That was the last lesson his father had taught him. He remembered his words from years ago when he struggled in school. "Taryn, the world will find ways to demean you. Don't let them. Stand tall, even if you have nothing left." Relaxing his hands, he straightened and forced himself to meet his stepmother's gaze. Her smirk faltered as she realized he was no longer cowering. For the first time that day, she looked at him with a hint of annoyance, as if his refusal to break was an insult to her victory. Uncle Vernon leaned closer and murmured, "That's it. Don't let her win until you've heard the last word." His voice was quiet and calm, yet firm enough to support Taryn. The lawyer continued reading, his voice remaining even. "To my wife, Selina Holt, I leave the home we shared, as well as a lifetime annuity of $150,000 per year, payable from the estate's trust fund." These words crashed onto the table like a clap of thunder. Selina's smile froze on her face. She blinked, her hand gripping the armrest tighter. She had expected six-figure sums, not an annual allowance that was less than his father's monthly income. For a moment, her mask cracked, and Taryn saw raw fear beneath it. She quickly composed herself, brushing a strand of hair from her face, but the damage was done. She no longer looked so self-assured. The lawyer paused briefly to let the words sink in before turning the page. Taryn's pulse throbbed in his ears. A sharp glint appeared in his mother's eyes, as if she knew what was about to happen. Uncle Vernon squeezed Taryn's shoulder firmly, as if he had always expected this outcome. Selina's voice cut through the silence, sharp and fragile. "This can't be. My husband would never limit me to such an allowance. He entrusted everything to me." The lawyer remained impassive. "Mrs. Holt, I assure you, these are Mr. Holt's final instructions, signed and legally notarized 3 months before his passing." Her jaw clenched, but she forced out a hollow laugh. Of course. I'm sure the bulk of the estate is still designated for me. Adrian always said he wanted me to be secure." Duran remained silent, though everything churned inside him. Her confidence was crumbling, and he felt a shift in the air. For years she had instilled in him that he was nothing and she was everything. But now, with each word the lawyer spoke, her world was cracking at the seams. In that moment, Taryn decided to hide no longer. Leaning forward, he spoke in a calm yet firm voice. "Funny, Selina. I don't recall my father ever saying he built his empire for you. He built it for his family." Her head snapped towards him, her eyes flashing with anger. "You think you know what he wanted?" she spat. "You were a child when he made decisions. You don't understand the man he became." Taryn didn't raise his voice. Meeting her gaze, he replied, "I know the man who raised me, and he never turned his back on his son." The lawyer cleared his throat to continue, but something significant had changed in this exchange. Selina was shaken and no longer seemed untouchable. For years she had thrived on Taryn's silence, his indecision, and his fear. By speaking up and refusing to submit, he had stripped her of some of her power. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and prepared to read the final clause. Taryn's chest filled with anticipation and dread simultaneously. He felt everything had led to this moment, to the decision his father had left, to the judgment he had made not only about Selina, but about Taryn as well. Selina shifted uncomfortably, the smugness gone from her face. Now she sat leaning forward, hands tightly clasped, her nails digging into her palms. She no longer looked like the confident woman who had entered this room. She looked like someone afraid of losing everything. His mother's hand touched his, a quiet reminder that she was still there, no matter what. Uncle Vernon nodded slightly at him, a faint smile playing on his lips. He knew, somehow, he had always known that his father wouldn't abandon him. Taryn took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. Regardless of whether the next sentence confirmed Selena's smug prophecy or revealed something entirely different, he was ready to face it without fear. He would not be the boy Selena had tormented for years. He would be the man his father had raised, a man who could stand tall even in the face of betrayal. The lawyer looked up and, in a firm voice, delivered the last words of the will. The entire room hung in suspended animation, awaiting the verdict that would decide everything. In the ensuing silence, the lawyer scanned the last page of the will. His fingers carefully touched the document, and his steady voice, laden with significance, commanded all eyes. Only the pounding of Taryn's heart was audible. Selena, usually so self-assured, sat motionless, her hands tightly clenching her knees. The lawyer began to read, "To my dear wife, Selena Holt, I bequeath our comfortable home and a lifetime annuity of $150,000 annually, so that she may want for nothing and live in comfort." Selena seemed speechless, her face paling. She wanted to object, but the lawyer, raising his voice, continued, "All my property, including real estate, business interests, investments, and assets totaling $36 million, I transfer to the full and undivided ownership of my only son, Taryn Holt." These words thundered like a bolt from the blue. A suffocating silence descended. Taryn's breath hitched. He had expected something, perhaps a small share, but not everything. The creak of a chair announced Selena's abrupt lunge forward. Her voice was sharp and full of despair. "What? This can't be. There's been a mistake." The lawyer lowered the page and looked at her calmly. "Mrs. Holt, I assure you the document was drafted with your husband's direct involvement, signed and notarized 3 months before his passing." "There is no mistake." Selena furiously slammed her palm on the table. "No, he promised me security. He said I would continue his legacy. You want me to believe he gave everything to this boy?" The words sounded like venom. Taryn's mother sat upright, her face reflecting triumph, but she remained silent. Uncle Vernon, in contrast, leaned forward and said calmly but with satisfaction, "Adrian was always a clear and precise man, Selena. If he wrote it this way, then that's what he intended. He trusted his son." Selena turned her wrath on Taryn, her eyes flashing lightning. "You think you deserve this? You were barely around. You constantly disappointed him. He told me, Taryn, that you weren't ready, that you lacked his discipline." Taryn met her gaze, unwavering. For years he had allowed her words to wound him, but not now, not after hearing his father's last will. Taking a deep breath, he replied in an even voice, "Perhaps he doubted me sometimes, but in the end, he trusted me. That's his choice, not yours." Selena's hands trembled on the table. "You manipulated him. There's no other explanation. He would never—" Her voice trailed off. She turned back to the lawyer. "Read it again. There must be some condition, a hidden clause." The lawyer cleared his throat. "There are no conditions. The estate belongs entirely to Mr. Taryn Holt. These were your husband's clear instructions." There was no room for doubt in his voice. Selena's face fell, her elegant mask replaced by panic. She pressed a hand to her forehead and shook her head in disbelief. "This cannot be." Inside Taryn, something shifted. For years he had lived in the shadow of her cruelty, doubting himself and whether his father saw him as anything more than a burden. But now, before his eyes, he saw undeniable proof of his father's faith. It wasn't just about the money, but about trust, recognition, a final lesson. He looked at his uncle, his eyes shining with pride. His uncle gave a slight nod as if to say, "This is the man Adrian raised." His mother placed her hand on his, her grip firm. She whispered, "He always believed in you." Selena raised her voice again, desperate and broken. "I'll contest it. I'll sue. You can't just give him everything and leave me with nothing." The lawyer remained calm. "You have the right to sue, Mrs. Holt, but this will is indisputable. Your husband took care to protect his son's inheritance." Selena's fury turned to something darker, her words sounding like broken glass. "You think you've won, Taryn? Money won't make you strong. You'll fail, and then you'll regret not having me there to guide you." Taryn stood up, no longer willing to sit in the chair that had confined him in silence. His voice cut through the tension. "No, Selena, I don't need your guidance. My father believed in me, and that's stronger than anything you could ever take away." Her face paled, her lips trembled, but she had no reply. She leaned back in her chair, her rage replaced by silence. The lawyer gathered the documents, his work complete. The reading of the will is now concluded. His words marked not only the end of a legal process, but the end of Selina's reign over Taryn, the end of her cruel words and power. Standing in the room, feeling the weight of $36 million, Taryn understood that the inheritance was not just wealth, but vindication. His father saw him, trusted him, and chose him. For years he had doubted it, but now he had irrefutable proof. Selina sat motionless, her silence louder than threats. His mother and uncle stood by him, their presence shielding him from her gaze. Taryn walked towards the door, each step feeling lighter. Before leaving, he turned to Selina. "You were right about one thing. He made a choice, but not the one you wanted. He showed who he truly trusted, and it wasn't you." Her eyes burned with fury, but she had nothing to say. The will had been read. Taryn stepped into the hallway and took a deep breath for the first time since he had entered the office. His father's legacy now belonged to him, and his faith in him was carved in stone. Selina could not take that away. Leaving the walls of the law office behind meant stepping into an entirely new reality. The fresh air filled Taryn's lungs, and for the first time in years, he felt the oppressive burden of Selina's presence lift. The will had been revealed, the verdict delivered, and the truth stood in all its undeniable clarity. His father believed in him. His empire, his legacy, his fortune, it all belonged to him now. But it wasn't the money that mattered most. It was the clarity. For long years, doubt had tormented his soul, fueled by Selina's words of his worthlessness. These words, like shackles, had bound him, making him believe that behind Selina's taunts and whispers lay his father's secret agreement. While his father was alive, he hadn't dared to ask him directly. The fear of the answer was too great. Now, he had received the answer he had waited for. He was not rejected. He was chosen. His mother followed close behind him as he descended the office steps. Her hand rested on his arm, her grip firm and reassuring. "Your father knew who you were, Taryn," she said. "He was proud of you. Never forget that." Her voice held a mix of relief and quiet triumph. For years she had witnessed the humiliation Selina subjected him to, but she remained silent, fighting her own battles in the shadows and praying that truth would prevail. And this day, it had come. At the sidewalk, Uncle Vernon joined them, his weathered face breaking into a smile Taryn had never seen before. "Your father never doubted you," he said. "He wanted you to prove yourself, and you did. Now you bear his name. Bear it with dignity." Taryn nodded, feeling the weight of those words. $36 million was not just wealth, it was an enormous responsibility. His father had dedicated his life to building an empire, brick by brick, deal by deal. Every decision he made was driven not only by financial gain but by foresight and persistence. Taryn understood that inheriting his father's fortune meant not just gaining access to resources, but proving himself worthy of his trust. Selina remained in the office, and Taryn vividly imagined her sitting there, stunned and crushed, watching her carefully constructed world crumble. For years she had believed she could control the situation, that his father's empire would fall into her hands. But instead, she had been granted only comfort and security, not power. This distinction was fundamental and intentional. His father had seen through her ambitions and chosen to protect his son. Returning home, Tehran spent long hours alone in his room. The documents from the lawyer lay neatly on his desk. $36 million, entire companies, properties across the country. He should have felt omnipotent, but instead, he felt humbled. His father had left this to him not to ensure a life of comfort, but as a challenge, a burden of responsibility. Lessons his father had taught him resurfaced early mornings, admonitions not to waste energy on those who wished him ill, quiet reminders that his father's blood ran in his veins, and that meant something. These lessons were more valuable than any numbers written on paper. In the days that followed, Taryn began to notice changes. Friends he hadn't spoken to in years suddenly called. Distant relatives congratulated him as if they had always believed in him. Some wanted favors, others money. Still others simply wished to attach themselves to what they perceived as power. His father's warning came to mind. Wealth reveals people's true nature. He was right. Taryn saw people more clearly than ever before. But most importantly, he realized he no longer lived in Selena's shadow. For years, she had defined his self-worth. Every insult, every smirk, every whispered threat had chipped away at his confidence. Now, her power had vanished, and with it, the lies about his insignificance. The following week, visiting his father's grave, Taryn stood in silence for a long time before speaking. "You believed in me, Dad. I won't squander this. I'll preserve what you built and make sure no one ever says your son wasn't strong enough." It wasn't just a promise to his father. It was a promise to himself. The lesson learned from that day was simple yet profound. People will try to convince you of your worthlessness, that you don't belong in this world, that you can't stand on your own 2 feet. If you believe them, you give them your power. But if you believe in yourself, if you remember who you are and where you come from, no one can break you. Selena thought she had won, that she could rewrite his father's legacy and erase Taryn's place in his history. But in the end, the truth proved stronger than her lies. His father believed in him. He would carry that faith throughout his life, and it was more valuable than any bank account. That is why he smiled when the lawyer read the final sentence.